In the beginning of the movie, we see an isolated area where 17-year-old Shell and her father, Pete, work at a petrol station in the remote isolated highlands of Scotland. Their life is so far away from the real world that they hardly have any company except each other. One day, Hugh, one of the station's regular customers, comes by as expected and Shell gets to work. Hugh was very interested in Shell. They talk with each other happily. Shell then goes over to the scrap yard adjacent to the petrol station, where her father was working on a car. She tells him that she had done for the day. Their home was attached to the petrol station. Shell starts cooking dinner. When Pete completes his work and comes back to home, he suddenly has an epileptic seizure. Shell stays with him and helps him by putting a cloth in his mouth. This was not for the first time. It happened with the Pete so many times. Shell hears the sound of a car sometime later. She comes back to the petrol station. This time it was another regular customer, Adam. He knows about Shell and his father very well. After paying for the petrol, he leaves. After that, Shell takes bath. A while later, Shell opens the door of the petrol station. That night, Robert comes here for taking help. Actually, his car had an accident. Shell and Pete go with him in the car. When they reach in the accident place, they see a deer who was injured, and this accident happened because of that deer. Pete killed the deer. Robert and Claire come with them for passing night. The next morning, they go from there. She goes to Pete's room for sleeping. Pete asks her that why she came here, then she tells that the boiler had switched off. Pete tries hard to fix it again but is unable to fix this. He goes back to his room and sleeps with Shell. After that, Hugh arrives there. He brings some clothes for Shell. She gets very happy after seeing the clothes. Shell asks him to wait for a bit, while she quickly changes the clothes. She comes back happily because the clothes will fit her perfectly. Shell hugs him in gratitude, and then, intending to settle his petrol bill, she turns to get his change from the cash box. Hugh couldn't control his feelings and hugs Shell from behind, but Shell shows no interest. He asks her to stay, but she manages to get away from him. He was a little ashamed. He simply takes his change and leaves without looking back at her. She comes back to home and sees Pete, who is fixing the heater. She asks Pete why he is working so hard. Pete says, "I can't sleep with you every night." One day Adam comes there. Shell is pleased to see Adam. She then invites him inside. She introduces him to the Pete. They all take coffee. Adam tells them that he has lost his job and wants a job at their station. Pete tells him that they don't need anyone here, although Shell wants Adam to stay with them. While leaving, Adam asks Shell to go for a drive with him. First, Shell refuses, but later she accepts and goes with him. That night she wanted to sleep with Pete, but Pete leaves her in her room. The next morning, Pete makes coffee for Shell and himself. Shell hugs him. A woman with her daughter comes to their station. She had to go to the toilet. When she leaves, Shell realizes that her daughter forgot her doll in the station. So she runs after the car with the doll. Finally, the woman slows down the car and drives back. She thanks Shell for the doll and drives away again. When Shell comes back to home, she finds that Pete has a stroke. When she doesn't get clothes in a hurry, she puts her hand in Pete's mouth. Because of that, her hand hurts. That night when they were lying together, Pete tells Shell that "I thought you left me." Shell says, "I will not leave you." Pete doesn't sleep, and when he hears the sound of a truck, he goes out of the room and comes to the road. He jumps in front of the truck, then a voice opens Shell's eyes. She starts looking for Pete. When she comes out, she finds out the truck and she sees that she has lost her father. She starts crying. Adam comes there to comfort her. He stays with her. Early in the morning, she leaves Adam to go to the petrol station. She refuels the truck, and she decides to join the driver without any thoughts of her final destination. Shell leaves her old life behind in search of a new life. Here the movie ends. If you like my video, then subscribe my channel or watching more videos.